2. Hey, how's it going, everybody? We're back with, and yeah, if you can hear us and see us, just I guess just to be sure, if someone can say something in the chat window.
Sign of life.
All right, Justin.
Hi.
All right, that's awesome. So yeah, we have our next guest, Kevin Rose from EOS New York, kind of on the forefront of a lot of things governance and VP related, communicating a lot of valuable information about what's going on in the EOS ecosystem all the time, and one of the most active Telegram channels. And funny comments on the chat window here, but really glad to have him here. So he's going to be discussing, I think, one of the more popular, it's called EOS User Agreements. And, it's gotten a lot of traction in the last month or so. And so I'm glad to have him here to explain a little bit about it, maybe an introduction, and maybe discuss design principles. I'll stick around. I'll be here. I guess I can maybe ask questions as well. But I'll let Kevin kind of just describe everything that he wants to the audience, and then maybe the audience and I can probably just ask some questions, because I think Kevin wants to be very interactive with this session here. So,
well, that's what this all is, right? That's what this whole governance discussion is. Has been one long interactive learning session with hundreds of or thousands of people all over the world that we may not even know.
Exactly. So yeah, we got a lot of pressure on our hands, guys. So So all right, sounds good. Oh, so Bill says a little echo, but it's okay for Daniel. I'm okay too. I'm hearing you clear. So
sounds good to me. Maybe I adjust this a little bit. How's that? We good, Bill? I'm going to assume that we're good.
Okay, great.
All right, awesome. I know. First, I'm sure that this has been said a number of times, but I'm continuously impressed with the consistent effort and work product that you have done with the governance study groups, the EOS Ignite conferences. You have become a focal, like a linchpin of the community, and it's only because of forums like these that we can get it all out there in one shot, right? Because otherwise it's a lot of fleeting Telegram discussions, which I stepped away from one seconds before we went live, arguing with the same people about the same things that we have been for months now. But yeah, so thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the effort that you put in, June. For those,
thanks, and really, it's up to all you guys that participate. I mean, that's I have the easy job. I just have to kind of set up the platform, and you guys can speak. So it's great to have you. So
I'm happy to talk until someone tells me to shut up. So for those of you that don't know me, hi, my name is Kevin Rose. I'm co-founder and head of community at EOS New York. We have been a top 21 block producer since the EOS mainnet launch back in June. And we're the first block producer to announce our candidacy in the Western world, or the English-speaking world. So I'm very happy to be able to speak with you all today regarding EOS governance. And before we go into the EOS User Agreement, I would just like to express part of what's going on with EOS New York regarding our position in EOS governance, because I'm sort of the policy maker at EOS New York, although there is no one in charge. We have a very flat organization, but my focus is particularly on community governance, public policy, communication, so all those things. And we have flipped since launch. And my grandfather used to say to me, "Only a fool cannot change his or her mind," and we have changed our mind. And that where we've changed our mind is how we've approached governance on EOS, how we define the basic level of governance on EOS, and where we are positioned with regard to dispute resolution, base layer, DAP layer, all these buzzwords. We've really tried to drill down into what is the actual debate, what are the results of the choices that we have made and are going to make. because with 6 months under our belt, this isn't pure philosophy anymore. This isn't quoting economists. This isn't theory. We have a small set of data, but we have data. We have 6 months of it. So in the beginning, we were very supportive of this venture that we were all taking with the EOS Core Arbitration Forum and dispute resolution as a platform level agreement on EOS. But unfortunately, the performance since then has led us to believe that the debate is no longer about base layer versus DAP layer. It is the EOS Core Arbitration Forum properly equipped with the experience and resources necessary to build a cutting-edge dispute resolution vendor framework on a multi-billion-dollar blockchain? Our answer is no. I wish we had published what I've been writing over the past week before coming on so that we had something to reference, but alas, I don't. But the EOS user agreement, if you understand now where our mindset is, trying to firmly root ourselves in the reality of the situation that we are presented in and not governance philosophy, we've written a template, an open source proposal called the EOS User Agreement. We stopped calling it the Constitution because this word is actually pretty polarizing, depending what language you speak or what culture you subscribe to, where you're from. Because what we are first and foremost is a decentralized operating system, and it is a platform for decentralized applications. And until we are in a place where the governance for the collective decision making of how we evolve the platform and make it a better place to code on, to build, we cannot afford the luxury of adding additional layers of complexity. And we have seen that in the mess that we have found, the mire that we have found ourselves in since launch. So what we've done with the EUA, the EOS User Agreement, is to approach the community with an open source template. So this is not something that EOS New York is going to propose ourselves. We sort of took we took a leaf out of Block One's book, which was, we're going to build it and then you do something with it. And one of the reasons why we took a template approach is because we saw multiple versions of constitutions or agreements or what have you that were vastly different than one another, but had the same elements. So when it comes time to actually decide and make a decision about which one we go with, it's going to be very difficult. And we could end up debating for just as long as we have been building the tools to solve the debate. So that was the approach. And I wish Kyle from EOS Vibes was able to join us, because he embraced that approach, and we're very thankful for him, where he wrote the EOS User Agreement version 3.0. Thanks for coming over the top of our 2.0. Could have named it something else, could you? But that's exactly what we want to happen. And we don't think it's our place to really weigh in on whether or not this fits in with what we were intending. We were intending a bare bones template that can be expanded upon or proposed as is, and the community can decide what to do with that. So that's sort of the approach that we have taken, and it's the result of 6 months of really diving into everything involving dispute resolution, and then really looking at the reality of what's going on around us and the unenforceable, suboptimal governing documents that we currently have. So that kind of sums it up. I hope that wasn't too short. I don't know if we want to go into particular parts of it, but I'm just reading the chat now to see if Rhett was telling me to shut up there.
Hey, yeah, great intro, Kevin. Really powerful, I think. And I think a lot of us came from that this kind of belief that, hey, there would be some governance and arbitration and all that, and we did have a lot of. I think a lot of us did believe that. I did, and I came in open-minded, believing that this would be kind of a vastly improved system from what we had. But you know, over time, then you know you start to learn kind of the in depth about what that means and what we sacrifice and things like that. So I did as well shift my thinking over these past months. So I would say that anybody who has, I mean, you know, if you kind of look into it, you know, it's okay to change your mind. I mean, if you have new information, you know, that's I mean, it's acceptable. Like people will understand, and I think this is, at least from, you know, my own situation, it was the same as
yeah. And one of the things that you mentioned was there was an expectation of governance, and I think that we have governance, and sometimes we're like, at least for so I'm speaking for myself now. I have to make a conscious effort to look outside of the EOS bubble sometimes, and I have to and I try to say, okay, what does governance mean in this world, and what does governance mean outside of it, or what does governance look like outside of it? And I think we absolutely have governance, and governance to me, and I try to go find as many definitions of it as I possibly could, and they all have a single common denominator, and that is it's a method for collective decision making. And if you start to look at just look at the blockchain bubble outside of the EOS bubble, right? Proof of work is a form of governance. It is a means to arrive at a collective decision, and that is through appointed governance. The miners who are able to express a large amount of hash power are able to express the largest opinion. But the actual stakeholders of the network are voiceless. And in delegated proof of stake, you delegate your stake, your interest, to representatives who are able to act on your behalf. So in that way, we're already leaps and bounds ahead of what would be a competing form of governance. We actually have a form of participation for the stakeholders. And the problem of what we ran into, I think, is that we bit off way more than we could chew at the beginning. And what we never really gave a chance was let this very simple method of collective decision-making work. Let's try it, which is just, we have block producers. They have been elected. Many of them are transparent, known, somewhat trusted. If you were to look at the white paper, block producers are not allowed to update the protocol in any way without referendum at all. We've done it over 35 times. And by the way, I don't like to reference the white paper because it's obsolete at this point. There are features missing. It's not canon. It's not the Bible. It was a guiding document when we launched, and now it's no longer relevant, unfortunately. But that's the approach that we took with the EOS User Agreement, because one of the shortcomings of the current constitutional framework we have is that there was so much ambiguity that when it comes time to make an actual decision, we take the words that are written down and we apply them to a real situation. You're not actually left with clarity. You're left with more ambiguity. So what we did is we delineated exactly what the responsibility of the block producer was and what the token holder was. And that's defined through the 15 out of 21 approval vote by a block producer and the referendum vote of the token holder. Well, actually, it's expressed mostly by the vote of the token holder for the block producer, but we're building this referendum as an additional form to poll and solicit the opinions of the stakeholders of the network beyond just the actual voting of a block producer. That very simple delineation between the two groups, what falls under block producer purview and token holder referendum, was completely absent from the original Constitution. From the very beginning, this was very little in the way of a guiding document. So we tried to be very explicit with the EOS User Agreement. We say, this is what a block producer is. This is what they do. This is what a token holder is. This is what they do. And here are the things that they're allowed to do. And there aren't many things that they're not allowed to do. Because we have spent so much time trying to capture every edge case that we're left with nothing that really allows us any wiggle room. It's funny because you've got this double-edged sword. It's a constitution that's incredibly vague, but it's also very strict in that there's no room to move. It's why the Reg Producer Agreement that we put in the EOA says, if you piss off 15 out of 21 block producers and they think what you did is wrong, they can remove you at any time for any reason. period. And what we can do with that is to say, now when we arrive at a big problem, we can act. We can feel empowered to act. The expectation has been set that block producers are expected to act. And then we can look back and say, how did that go? What was that case that we just experienced? What can we learn from that? And what can we encode into a document that can inform future token holders? Because really what this is setting expectation. Beyond the actual vote for block producers and the 15 out of 21 block producer MSIG, there is no enforcement of anything possible. There is no accountable organization besides a block producer that is voted for. And if we get to the point where the EOS Core Arbitration Forum is able to affirm their arbitrators via community referendum, then they can be held accountable. And until then, they are an unaccountable entity operating wildly irresponsibly without the resources to do something that would benefit any of us. It's just damaging. End of rant.
Yes, yeah, and I echo the sentiments. And maybe does the audience have any thoughts? Okay, Tarek says right on, Kevin, and John says ECAF was never in advanced state of readiness.
So John, I want to talk about that real quick, because part of what I'm writing is I'm going through and trying to understand, how do we get here? What actually happened to get us here? On May 30th, the EOS Core Arbitration Forum was removed from the interim constitution on the EOS mainnet GitHub repo, and it was in its place was the International Chamber of Commerce. This action was initiated by members of Block 1, who were the same people that were the founders of ECAF. The reason that it was put there was because the founders of ECAF, that were the either consultants, employees, members, whatever you want to call it, that satisfies some legal requirement of Block 1, deemed ECAF to not be ready. That is why that they were taken out. And then pushback got them put back in. So it would lead us to believe that they were ready. History shows us that that is not the case. So no, John. ECAF was not in an advanced state of readiness. They were not.
All right. So, and we have a few questions popping up. And Kevin, if you click on ask a question, you should also be able to see the few questions. And people, okay, you can vote on the questions just like how we're going to do with the referendum. So you can, get the, what question you like the most, kind of higher up in the rankings here. But feel free, Kevin, to answer some of the questions there.
I'll just start with, and Rhett, the reason why it was never shared is because everybody forgot, because it's been pretty wild since EOS launch. It wasn't until I went back to look that I find it today. Kevin, do you mind giving an easy to understand common example of something that may be enforced by the EOS User Agreement and what the process would look like versus what it looks like today? Okay. So going back to what I said, I would be remiss if I could tell you that I could predict exactly what's going to happen, since the entire purpose of the EOS User Agreement is to remain broad enough that you can be flexible and react to what is happening. Arguably, so I actually spoke to, I'm not a technical person, so trying to understand the very technical details behind Byzantine fault tolerance and the way that the actual blockchain is designed with 21 validators is difficult when you get down to the nitty gritty. But my question to someone that was knowledgeable was, does operating another node threaten Byzantine fault tolerance of the system? And the answer is no, so long as they are separate computers, essentially. But yes, if the actors are the same. So the validators, if they remain separate, then the BFT status of the system can remain. If I'm saying something wrong, I apologize. But if the actors or the influencers, direct or indirect control over those validators are centralized, that certainly threatens the network in terms of what a malicious actor could accomplish. And so in the case of a block producer assuming the role of an actor on behalf of another validator, i.e. they reg-produced another account, if that were to be identified and proven to, to whatever threshold that 15 out of 21 block producers they are satisfied, they could do something about it. The only two ways that I know that something can be done about it is through the remove producer command, which is simply remedied by reg producing again, or something far more permanent and serious, which is to affect the keys of a block producer account so that they can no longer access it anyway. And basically, you'd have to go through the process of communicating out to all the token holders that voted for you and convincing them to vote for you again under a new account. I'm not saying that that's what we should do. I'm just saying that is what could happen. And in the EOS User Agreement, there's an explicit clause in the Reg Producer Agreement that exempts a block producer's account from an article in the EOS User Agreement, which exempts all accounts from being affected by block producers. So that very thing could happen. That would be an example.
Yeah, that's interesting too. And just to follow up on that, block producers in that case do have a lot of even more power, I think, in that situation if they can blacklist other BPs. So, I'm always for the token holders having the ultimate kind of say.
Well, remember going back to when I said that this was a document that sets expectations, because nothing we can take the EOS User Agreement.
Yeah.
All right. Besides Reg Arb and Reg Forum, let's pretend those don't exist for a second. Those are additional clauses that are actual smart contracts that would go into the system if approved. So take those out for a second. If the EOS User Agreement went into the blockchain, then nothing would change as far as code. The only thing that changes is the expectation. That's what this document is actually meant to do. It's to give clarity, because we are spending a lot of time going around and around and around on the same exact issues with no clarity or resolution.
I agree too. I think sometimes we kind of over exaggerate what the actual effect would be of any of these kind of documents, and it is more setting expectations, I think, is the key to all of the charters, constitutions, user agreements we have, because really the code is dictating what really happened.
I know you don't want to say it. I don't think either of us want to say it.
Yeah.
All right. But it's not, I hate these buzzwords because it puts you in a box if you say it, but code is law, right? It's not, that's not what I'm advocating, but there are two mechanisms for change, for immediate, enforceable, irrevocable change that exist. Two, that is it. It is block producers doing something or token holders voting for block producers. Anything else is a layer on top of that. And I'm not saying that we need to forever exist in that layer of simplicity, but we did not actually give that an appropriate chance.
Yeah, no, that's a very clear way of, I think, just explaining the reality of what we have, I think, and I think that's what we need. So we have a lot of questions coming up here, so you can go ahead and I'll
sure.
You can.
Okay, so top one is from Eve. Hey Eve, what do you think of ECAF order number 2 that is supposedly coming? Damaging. Should BPs approve the MSIG when requested? If they don't, what's next? This is hard to answer because I'm still collecting thoughts to put into long form so that we can avoid the fleeting Telegram type thing. The fact that an ECAF order is this pending doom, the fact that it's even a question is ridiculous. This is not how it's supposed to be. That's actually a crappy thing to say, because who knows how it's supposed to be, and who the hell am I to say how it's supposed to be? But it does seem like a bastardization of the arbitration process and alternative dispute resolution to have a very private matter. This is a private matter. Arbitration is private. But to have it be so public that we're asking it in this kind of forum, saying, what happens when that train comes barreling down those tracks? It's hard for me to even get past that thought of it to answer it. Should BPs approve it? What EOS New York thinks is important for block producers is to be predictable, because again, like everything that's written down in the Constitution, they're just words, and block producers can actually do whatever they want. It doesn't matter what we put anywhere. It's about it's about being held accountable by token holders. It's about that my job may be gone by the time we're done with this conversation. That's what keeps me honest, right? So should they approve it? EOS New York has approved every single one, and the recent one we really didn't want him. We also have we have in our own code of conduct a clause that says we will not publicly opine on the details of any ongoing arbitration. So I'm going to categorize that under that clause, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, sounds good. So yeah, a lot of very kind of yeah, tricky and hot topics that are just happening right now. So this is very timely to be able to at least discuss these issues. So,
sure.
Let me see. We have a few other questions, and then maybe in a few minutes we could also bring in Kyle as well, just to join in on the conversation.
Sure. So the next question is, ideally, how should EOS handle a black swan event like the DAO? Does accidental versus malicious actions matter? I think it's rules, additional layers of governance, codes of conduct, promises. These are all very important because this is a semi-trusted ecosystem. But you know, when I have a chance to release the kinds of things that we've been writing, you'll see where some opinions that we have on that, the semi-trusted nature of it. But when you start to compare the honorable thing to do versus your own survival, that's where things start to break down, right? So if the network is threatened in such a massive way that some DAO level black swan event were to happen, and BPs let it happen because the rules said that they should let it happen, and then this all ends, well, what good does that do anybody? So it really, like, we like to jab at Vitalik and the people that decided to fork the DAO, but they may have thought that this was the end, that if they do not do anything, then then it's all going to end anyway. I'm not in that position, so I can't really comment on it. And even if we were in that position, I can't comment on what 20 other elected block producers would do. So how would they handle a black swan event? Block producers would very quickly communicate. That would be the first step, is open lines of communication, and make sure somebody is there that speaks a whole lot of different languages. Does that, and so does accidental versus malicious actions matter? I think when it comes to ensuring the survival of the network, no. If the effect is the same, I don't think it matters.
Okay, great.
And by the way, to sum up the response there is, I don't know what EOS New York would do. I can't speak for everybody else, but our goal is to not let EOS fail. So I'll say that, which I don't think that we're anywhere near, despite the maybe doom and gloom of my tone. Because we haven't talked about the technology at all. We've only talked about the governance quagmire that we're in. Totally different.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get to those more lighter topics, or more interesting, not interesting, but I'll say just more exciting topics in the future. So. And
that's actually that's the purpose of what we're writing now, is a back to basics. Like, what are we really doing? What are we really working on? What is the purpose? Why are we all here? What are we actually solving with these debates? Because I think that there are things we need to look outward and understand that there is competition. We're all in a collaborative space with regard to EOS.io chains, but outside of that, it is rather cutthroat, and we are trying to survive in a world of incumbents. So if we are to survive, we need to compete. And if we need to compete, we need to stop being distracted. That's what we're trying to accomplish with what hopefully I can release tomorrow. But so the question here is, we are currently checking the power of BPs through DOS. I'm gonna assume that means DPoS. How do we check the power of ARB forms and ARBs in your proposal? Great question. Easy to answer. Don't use them if you don't like them. That's it. They can never affect an account. Block producers are not in any way involved in affecting user accounts, as in bypassing permissions checks. Doesn't happen. And the reason why that's okay is because arbitration, or alternative dispute resolution, is possible to achieve between consenting parties that are party to an agreement, and therefore party to a dispute ultimately, using the permission system that we have on EOS. you can build a smart contract, and it would be hard because no one's built it yet. These tools don't exist. And if ECAF said they wanted to be a tech company that open sourced an arbitration suite of smart contracts, I'd be all for that. But that's not what they're doing. By setting up a permission structure that would introduce a third party that would be able to come in over the top and control the contract in the case of a dispute, you have effectively frozen assets while you go through arbitration. That's arbitration. Is when you're in agreement and you have a fight about it. What we have is the police and a judicial system that we are far too immature to claim the right to have. So totally different things. But the end of the question is just don't use them if they're bad. They can't touch you otherwise.
Sounds good. So let's try to see if Kyle's still. Let's see if we could get Kyle in. If you want to answer questions in the meantime, feel free. I'm going to invite Kyle, who's got just recently issued like you mentioned earlier, a 3.0 version of the EOS New York User Agreement. And so Kyle, I think you're there. We just can you say something about it, Kyle?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, Kyle.
Hey, can you see me? More importantly, it's we got a blackout here, and it's absolutely pitch black. I've had to drive 2 miles down the road to get a signal. I don't know if you can see how literally total blackout.
We can see you perfectly, but you might have to get creative with the mute button.
Okay, great. So you can hear me okay?
I mean, just right? There's a pretty bad echo, so if you're not actually speaking, make sure you go on mute.
Okay, cool.
All right. June, I think you're on mute. Or am I on mute?
That. Hey, Kyle, sorry about that, guys. So Kyle, there was an echo on your side. I don't know how you can fix that, but if anything, just try to mute yourself when you're not speaking, and that will probably help a lot. Can you hear? If you maybe say hi if you can hear me, Kyle. Maybe Kyle doesn't hear me. Kyle, do you hear me? So, okay, he doesn't hear me. So maybe Kevin, if you say something, can he hear you?
Kyle, can you hear me? Wave your hand if you can hear me. All right, there we go. Can you hear June?
No, I can't hear June. I can only hear you.
Okay. So I think we'll pick it up with the questions, or how would you like to proceed, June?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, so there's always some tech issues, but go ahead, Kevin. We'll answer the last couple questions, and then we could get Kyle maybe to maybe you guys can talk about the user agreement, and maybe Kyle can maybe add his just have some comments on what he's changed in kind of the original user agreement, and then we could go from there. So.
Sure. So I see Perry has 2 questions, so I'll try to answer them quickly. What is the scope of disputes that you envision being heard at the base layer, i.e. lost keys, theft, or carding contract deviation in your proposal? None. There is no such thing. Base layer is not a thing in the EOS user agreement. And this is actually one of the things that I wanted to talk about. It's hard to because we haven't published it yet, but maybe I'll come back to that in a second. And the second question is, in your proposal, what do you see as the scope of on-chain BP response to the Black Swan question? Well, within weeks of launch, the chain stopped. And at 6 a.m., I woke up, checked my phone, and then I saw what was going on. I think it had happened maybe 30 seconds before I looked. And then within 10 minutes, I had already spoken with the rest of EOS New York. We had gotten on a group call with EOS DAC, EOS Sweden, EOS Rio, Block 1, Dan Larimer was on the call. Everybody, communication. And it took 6 hours, and the chain was back up. And within those 6 hours, we were communicating live updates in 3 languages by having everybody communicate. Alex from EOS Canada was editing the words that I was writing for technical accuracy. People were working with Dan and Phil from the word has escaped me, but communication, that's pretty much going to happen. But that was I mean, it happened. The chain stopped. That was a black swan event, in my opinion. Chain stopping is bad. Communication. But the one thing that I wanted to say before we get into additions to the Reg Producer Agreement is, what exactly should we be doing if ECAF is a distraction? And what should we be doing if there is competition looming? What is it that we're not doing? And to give you the very short version, contracts on EOS are mutable by default. This is by design because coding bug-free is very difficult. Contracts on Ethereum are immutable by default. They cannot change, but they go through great lengths to figure out how to change them because updates need to happen. What we need to be talking about is, how does the narrative change from issues with governance to a move to structured, immutable architecture of decentralized applications on EOS? Governance in this instance is the relationship both with workflow and communication between dApp developers and block producers. What a semi-immutable architecture for a dApp could look like is, you have the very sensitive versions of your dApp, the smart contracts that govern, for example, the token, the EOSIO.token standard. The permissions to change that contract would be shared with a third party, in this case, a block producer. And then so now we're looking at a new phase of development on EOS. You have your requirements gathering, you have your development, you have your alpha beta testing, you have your launch, and then you have 6 months, you have your move to a semi-immutable architecture where you can say, and this is especially valuable for a gambling dApp, you can say, we can't change our token contract if we tried. Because right now, nobody's talking about this. And we need to trust dApp developers that they're not going to do something shady. We need to be pushing the narrative that immutable architecture, semi-immutable architecture, in that the bar for updates is moved pretty high, because you have to have block producers sign the off on those updates by having a multi-sig on any account that needs to deploy those updates. That's what we need to be talking on. That's governance, because we are a decentralized application development platform, and we need to build dApps. If we want to build pockets that abide by very specific sets of rules, everybody can, that's what EOS DAC is building. They're building the DAC in a box, and that's a very exciting thing. But right now we need to talk about workflows between block producers, which are service providers for the network, and dApps, which are value creators on the network, and how they work together.
All right, well said, Kevin. Yeah, and I like the nuance of how, some people may not be aware that, dApp developers can change their code and give updates, and there's a process that and a path for it to become more immutable over time, and have the BPs be a multi-sig in that contract to make it more immutable and maybe progress beyond that. So really, I think that nuance there is something that I think people should really kind of dig into and learn about how EOS works and is designed. As a developer, I think it's still a lot. it's just so much easier to develop that way, where there's a path to immutability and you're not kind of stuck forever from the outset. So that's a technological benefit beyond just something we have to kind of discuss as a governance issue as well. So so thanks so much, Kevin. You can stay on here. We'll give Kyle the floor to maybe just expand on the EOS New York User Agreement. And if Kyle's there, we'll probably mute ourselves. And Kyle probably can't hear me. So Kevin, if you could do me a favor and let Kyle know he can go ahead and.
Can you hear me? Wave if you can. Kyle, can you hear me? Uh-oh.
Okay. So he can't. Okay, Kyle, can you? He wasn't hearing me earlier, and there's sometimes Crowdcast has some weird audio glitches where you can hear one person but can't hear the other. So that does happen every once in a while. So we'll see if Kevin could get back on. And power's out. You could see it's darkness over there, and maybe it's something that hey, as a BP, it's always a good reminder that hey, power, you lose power, and there could be situations like this. So
well, the power, whether or not I have power is irrelevant, thank God.
True. True. So redundant.
Where we just put our data center was one of obviously one of the things that we just checked is like, unless there is a nuclear cataclysmic event, are you going to be able to provide power? And of course, yes. So that's why we went where we went, which we'll have our bare metal up soon, testing it now.
Nice to hear. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah. So I think Kyle, we'll wait for a little bit. Hey, just feel free to just chat a little bit more. We'll give Kyle, maybe about 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so. And then we're pushed. The next session will start a little bit later, but I think we could catch up on time since that one's more of an open discussion. And we were going to actually have a base layer versus non-base layer discussion. And I kept it open-ended so that people could come in and rotate in if they had something very if they wanted to get something off their chest, or just so that's the next session. But
that's what I was doing right before I came on, was arguing with Ian.
Okay.
Again, about the same thing, Ian and Ava.
Okay.
That's what we've been doing lately.
Okay.
But I won't be able to be there for that. But ECAF doesn't have experience and they're broke. So okay.
Okay, I'll remember that, and we'll share your two short one-liners there, and see what the response is. And Kyle, I know he just chatted here. He said bloody power cut, and so I know he was on mobile earlier. So Kyle, if and it's okay, Kyle, maybe you could drop in a little bit later in the conference if we are able to if you are able to get power and a location to set it up, and if your mobile seemed to work at least for a little bit, so just let us know. But so we could probably save a little bit of time on this session if Kyle can't make it, and we could just hop into the next one. And
however you want to do it, you're MC.
So, okay. And then, so you have to hop off. You can't get to the next session, but it's probably the same. So
I can stay for about 20 minutes.
Okay.
That works.
Okay, sure. So we have actually a video recording from Jetsy. His timing didn't work too. So I'm going to play that video for I think it's about 20 minutes or 15 or so. And then right after that, we'll have and we could play that after if you want to. Do you want to kind of, we could push the base layer kind of debate first, and then do Jetsy's comments and video later. What do you think?
However, I'm good till 5:20. So however you'd like to go.
Okay. So yeah, okay. Let's just hop on. Let's see if and are people interested? Kevin and I and others probably have kind of heard all the arguments, and there's always a back and forth. So we'll see who's out there who wants to discuss it. But is that cool with you guys out there in the audience? We're just gonna hop on to the next session and discuss that. And for those that are here, remember if you want to vote on the poll about base layer arbitration, you have to go to the schedule up on the left side of your dashboard and go back to, I think it says session 1, and actually I titled it session 0, and then the poll is right there. So go to that session in the schedule on the very first session, and then you can vote on the poll at any time. So yeah, let's just hop in. Let's just get things off our chest, and or just discuss and I just try to get the main points out there, and then we'll go from there, and then we'll play Jetsy's version charter video right after that. So all right, hang tight, guys. We'll just hop on to the next session just right now, like in a minute. So see you guys there.